rushed through the busy corridors of Denver International Airport, his carry-on bag bouncing against his hip with every hurried step. The digital clock above gate B-23 showed 6:47 p.m., and his flight to Chicago was scheduled to depart at 7:15 p.m. He had exactly 28 minutes to make it through the final security checkpoint and find his gate. The day had been a disaster from the start. His morning presentation to potential investors had run over by 2 hours. His taxi to the airport had gotten stuck in unexpected traffic, and now he was cutting it dangerously close to missing the most important flight of his career. Tomorrow morning, he was supposed to meet with the Executive Board of Industries about a promotion that would change everything for him and his family. As navigated through the crowd of travelers, something caught his attention near gate B-19. An elderly man in a worn military jacket sat alone on a bench, his weathered hands shaking as he tried to read a crumpled piece of paper. The man's eyes were wet with tears, and his breathing appeared labored and uneven. Slowed his pace for just a moment, glancing between the distressed veteran and the departure board that still showed his gate number. Every instinct told him to keep moving, to focus on his own urgent deadline. But something about the man's obvious distress made him pause completely. The elderly veteran looked up as approached, and their eyes met. The man's face was lined with deep wrinkles that spoke of decades of hard work and sacrifice. His military jacket bore several faded patches, and a small American flag pin was attached to his collar with obvious pride. "Excuse me, sir," said gently, setting down his bag and crouching to the man's eye level. "Are you all right? You seem upset about something." The veteran's voice trembled as he spoke. "I'm trying to get home to see my grandson before." He paused, wiping his eyes with a shaky hand. "The doctors say I don't have much time left, and little Tommy is graduating from high school tomorrow. I promised his mother I'd be there." Felt his heart sink as he listened to the man's story. The veteran explained that his name was Henry, and he was 82 years old. He had served in Vietnam and had been living alone in Denver since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. His daughter lived in Portland, Oregon, and this would likely be his last chance to see his only grandson reach this important milestone. "The problem is," Henry continued, his voice breaking slightly, "I can't figure out how to change my boarding pass on this computer thing. My flight was supposed to leave in 2 hours, but they moved it to tomorrow morning because of some mechanical issue. I don't know how to use these machines, and everyone at the desk is too busy to help an old fool like me." Glanced at his watch again. 6:52 p.m. His own flight would begin boarding in just over 20 minutes, and he still needed to get through security and navigate to his gate. But looking at Henry's confused and frightened expression, he knew he couldn't just walk away. "Let me help you with that," said, picking up Henry's boarding pass and examining the information printed on it. "We can get this sorted out together." As studied the boarding pass and began to understand Henry's situation, he learned more about the elderly veteran's circumstances. Henry explained that he had been saving money for months to afford this trip to Portland. He lived on a small military pension and Social Security, and the cost of the plane ticket represented a significant sacrifice for him. The mechanical issue with Henry's original flight had created a cascade of problems. The airline had automatically rebooked him on a flight the next morning, but Henry hadn't understood the automated text messages and emails explaining the change. He had arrived at the airport at his original departure time, only to discover that his flight no longer existed. Walked with Henry to the nearest airline service desk, where a long line of frustrated passengers waited to speak with overwhelmed customer service representatives. The line moved incredibly slowly, and watched the minutes tick by on the terminal clocks with growing anxiety about his own departure time. When they finally reached the front of the line, the young airline employee seemed rushed and impatient. She quickly confirmed that Henry's flight had indeed been canceled due to mechanical problems, and that he had been rebooked on the 9:30 a.m. departure the following morning. "But I need to be in Portland tonight," Henry pleaded. "My grandson's graduation is tomorrow afternoon, and I promised I'd be there." The employee tapped on her keyboard for several minutes before shaking her head. "I'm sorry, sir, but that's the earliest available flight we have. All of tonight's flights to Portland are completely booked." Could see the devastation in Henry's eyes as this news sank in. The old man's shoulders slumped, and he seemed to age another 10 years right before size. Henry began to explain about his terminal illness and his grandson's graduation, but the airline employee had already turned her attention to the next customer in line. As they walked away from the service desk, noticed that it was now 7:08 p.m. His own flight would begin boarding in 7 minutes, and he was still on the wrong side of the security checkpoint. He felt torn between his desire to help Henry and his desperate need to make his own flight. That's when made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Stood in the middle of the bustling airport terminal, watching Henry slowly shuffle back toward the gate area with his head hung low in defeat. The announcement for flight echoed through the terminal speakers. Final boarding call for Flight 1247 to Chicago, departing from Gate B23. His phone buzzed with a text message from his wife, Sarah. "Good luck tomorrow, honey. We're all counting on this promotion. Love you." Closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about everything that hung in the balance. The promotion would mean a 40% salary increase, enough to finally pay off their medical bills from Sarah's surgery last year and put their daughter Emma through college without drowning in debt. His entire family's future depended on him being in that boardroom tomorrow morning. But as he looked at Henry's retreating figure, something deeper stirred within his chest. This wasn't just about helping a stranger anymore. This was about doing what was right, regardless of the personal cost. Made his choice. He hurried to catch up with Henry, gently placing a hand on the veteran's shoulder. "Henry, wait a minute. I want you to take my seat on the flight to Chicago tonight." Henry looked confused and shook his head immediately. "Oh no, son, I couldn't possibly do that. You have your own important business to attend to." "Chicago connects to Portland," explained patiently. "There's a late flight from Chicago to Portland that arrives at 11:30 p.m. You could still make it to your grandson's graduation if we can get you on that connection." Henry's eyes widened with hope, but then he shook his head again. "I can't afford to buy your ticket from you, and I won't accept charity from a stranger." Smiled warmly. "It's not charity, Henry. It's what any decent person should do when they have the power to help someone in need." For the next 15 minutes, worked with airline personnel to transfer his ticket to Henry's name. The process was complicated and required multiple supervisor approvals, but determination and calm persistence eventually wore down their resistance. The airline staff seemed moved by selfless gesture and Henry's obvious gratitude. While they waited for the paperwork to be processed, used his smartphone to book Henry's connecting flight from Chicago to Portland. He also arranged for wheelchair assistance at both airports, knowing that Henry's arthritis would make the long walks through the terminals difficult. As Henry's new boarding pass was being printed, the elderly veteran grabbed hand with both of his own trembling hands. Tears streamed down his weathered cheeks as he struggled to find adequate words. "I don't understand why you're doing this for me," Henry whispered. "You don't even know me." Thought about his own grandfather, who had passed away when was in college. Grandpa had been a Korean War veteran who had always taught that character was measured not by what you accomplished for yourself, but by what you sacrificed for others. "My grandfather used to tell me that we're all connected in ways we can't see," replied. "He said that sometimes we're put in someone's path not by accident, but because we're meant to help them. I think today was one of those times." Henry's flight began boarding 20 minutes later. As they walked toward the gate together, Henry shared more stories about his grandson Tommy. He showed a crumpled photograph of a tall, athletic young man in a baseball uniform. Tommy was planning to attend college on a partial baseball scholarship, and Henry couldn't have been more proud. "His father died when he was only 8 years old," Henry explained. "I've tried to be there for him as much as possible, but it's been hard living so far away. This graduation means everything to both of us." At the gate, helped Henry organize his carry-on bag and made sure he had all his important documents easily accessible. He also wrote down his own phone number and insisted that Henry call him once he arrived safely in Portland. "I still can't believe you're giving up something so important for me," Henry said as the gate agent called for his boarding group. Thought about his morning meeting with Industries. He had already sent an email to his boss explaining that a family emergency would prevent him from attending. It wasn't technically true, but in his heart, felt like Henry had become family in the brief time they had known each other. "Some things are more important than business meetings," replied simply. "Your grandson needs his grandfather there tomorrow, and I had the power to make that happen." As Henry disappeared down the jet bridge, felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. Yes, he had potentially sacrificed his career advancement, but he had also preserved something much more valuable. He had maintained his integrity and lived up to the values his grandfather had instilled in him years ago. Walked slowly back through the terminal toward the exit, planning to catch the first flight to Chicago the following morning. He would miss his important meeting, but he would face the consequences with a clear conscience. That's when he noticed something unusual happening around him. Other passengers and airport employees kept glancing in his direction and whispering among themselves. A few people smiled at him warmly, and one woman even approached him directly. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the man who just gave his plane ticket to that elderly veteran?" Nodded, unsure why this stranger was interested in his private business. The woman introduced herself as Jennifer Martinez, a local news reporter who had been returning from an assignment when she witnessed the entire interaction between and Henry. "I've been covering human interest stories for 15 years, Jennifer explained, "and what you just did was one of the most selfless acts I've ever witnessed. Would you be willing to tell me more about why you decided to help that man?" Was hesitant at first, but Jennifer's genuine interest and professional manner eventually convinced him to share Henry's story. As they talked, more people began to gather around them, listening intently to the details of Henry's situation and spontaneous decision to help. What didn't realize was that Jennifer had been their conversation on her news station's social media accounts. Within minutes, the story of his kindness began spreading across the internet like wildfire. But the real surprise was yet to come. As finished telling Henry's story to Jennifer Martinez and the growing crowd of interested listeners, he noticed unusual activity beginning to unfold throughout the terminal. Security personnel were moving with increased urgency, speaking rapidly into their radio devices and directing passengers away from certain areas. At first, assumed it was just typical airport security protocols, but then he heard the announcement that would change everything. "Attention all passengers and airport personnel. Due to an immediate security concern, all flights are temporarily suspended and the terminal is being evacuated. Please proceed calmly to the designated assembly areas outside the building. Do not return for any personal belongings." The crowd around and Jennifer began to disperse quickly as people grabbed their luggage and headed toward the exits. Felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what this meant. Henry's flight to Chicago, the flight that had given up his seat for, was somewhere in the air when this security alert began. Jennifer's professional instincts kicked in immediately. She began making phone calls to her news station while simultaneously trying to gather information from airport security personnel. Stayed close to her, hopping to learn more about what was happening and whether Henry would be safe. Within minutes, they learned the shocking details. An anonymous tip had been called in to airport security, reporting a suspicious package in Terminal B. The caller had provided specific details about a potential explosive device hidden somewhere near Gate B-23, which was exactly where his original flight to Chicago had departed from. Bomb disposal experts were already on their way to investigate the threat. The entire terminal was being cleared as a precautionary measure, and all flights that had recently departed were being diverted to alternative airports until the situation could be resolved. His mind raced as he processed this information. If he had been on that flight as originally planned, he would now be in the air, possibly heading toward an emergency landing at an unknown airport. Instead, he was safely on the ground, evacuating with everyone else. As they walked toward the exit with hundreds of other displaced passengers, couldn't help but think about the strange chain of events that had led to this moment. His decision to help Henry had not only allowed the elderly veteran to see his grandson's graduation, but it had also inadvertently removed from a potentially dangerous situation. Jennifer continued to work her sources, learning more details about the security threat. The suspicious package had been discovered exactly where the anonymous caller had indicated, and initial examinations suggested it could indeed be a legitimate explosive device. "This is incredible," Jennifer said too as they reached the outdoor assembly area. "Your act of kindness didn't just help that veteran, it may have saved your own life as well." Felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had transpired. In the span of just a few hours, he had made a split-second decision to sacrifice his career opportunity for a stranger's happiness, and that decision had somehow protected him from unforeseen danger. His phone rang, and he saw his wife Sarah's number on the caller ID. She had obviously seen the news reports about the airport evacuation and was worried about his safety. "Thank God you're okay," Sarah said, her voice filled with relief and concern. "I just saw on the news that Denver airport was evacuated. Are you hurt? What happened?" Explained the entire situation to Sarah, from his encounter with Henry to the security threat that had grounded all flights. As he spoke, he could hear Sarah crying softly on the other end of the line. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Helping that veteran was exactly the right thing to do, regardless of what it might cost us financially." While talked with his wife, Jennifer continued gathering information for her news story. She learned that the bomb squad had successfully secured the suspicious device and confirmed that it was indeed a functional explosive. The FBI was now investigating the incident as an act of domestic terrorism. What made the situation even more remarkable was the timing. The device had been set to detonate at approximately 7:45 p.m., which was exactly when its original flight would have been taxiing for takeoff. If the anonymous tip had not been called in, and if the evacuation had not occurred, the consequences could have been catastrophic. As this information spread through the crowd of evacuated passengers, people began to look at with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Word had already spread about his sacrifice for Henry, and now everyone realized that his act of kindness had inadvertently saved not only his own life, but potentially the lives of everyone who would have been on that flight. Jennifer's news story was gaining national attention as social media users shared the remarkable tale of selflessness and the unexpected chain of events that followed. The hashtag #AngelInTheAirport began trending on multiple platforms as people expressed their amazement at the story's incredible coincidences. But the most surprising development was still to come. Received a phone call from an unknown number with a Chicago area code. When he answered, he heard an unfamiliar voice introducing himself as Robert, the CEO of Industries, the very company was supposed to meet with the following morning. "Mr. Robert said, I've been following the news reports about what happened at Denver Airport today, and I've learned about the extraordinary sacrifice you made for that elderly veteran. I wanted to call you personally to discuss your situation." Felt his heart sink, assuming that was calling to inform him that the missed meeting had cost him the promotion opportunity. He began to explain about Henry and the circumstances that led to his decision, but interrupted him gently. "Mister, you don't need to explain yourself to me. What you did today demonstrated exactly the kind of character and leadership that our company values most. We're not just looking for someone who can manage numbers and attend meetings. We're looking for someone with the moral courage to do what's right, even when it costs them personally." Was stunned into silence as continued speaking. "I'd like to offer you the position we were going to discuss tomorrow, but with an additional responsibility. We want you to head our new corporate social responsibility division, where your job will be to identify ways our company can make a positive impact in communities across the country. Your actions today prove that you're exactly the kind of person who can lead that initiative." As absorbed this incredible news, he realized that his decision to help Henry hadn't cost him his career after all. Instead, it had opened doors to opportunities beyond anything he had previously imagined. But the day's surprises weren't over yet. 3 hours after the airport evacuation began, found himself sitting in the airport's temporary media center, surrounded by reporters from across the country who wanted to hear his story. Jennifer Martinez had become his informal spokesperson, helping him navigate the overwhelming attention that his act of kindness had generated. The FBI had concluded their investigation and confirmed that the bomb threat had been real and imminent. Agent, the lead investigator on the case, explained to the gathered media that the explosive device was sophisticated and would have caused significant damage if it had detonated as planned. The anonymous tip that led to the evacuation came in at exactly 7:23 p.m., Agent announced. "Our analysis indicates that the device was set to activate at 7:45 p.m., which would have coincided with several flight departures. We believe this evacuation prevented a major tragedy." As listened to these details, he felt overwhelmed by the realization of how many lives had been affected by his simple decision to help Henry. The ripple effects of kindness had extended far beyond anything he could have imagined when he first approached the distressed veteran at Gate B19. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. When he opened it, he saw a photo that brought tears to his eyes. The message was from Henry, who had arrived safely in Portland and was already at his grandson Tommy's house. The photo showed Henry in his military dress uniform standing proudly next to a tall young man in a cap and gown. Both were beaming with joy. The message read, "Thanks to you, I made it to Tommy's graduation. This is the happiest day of my life. You are a true hero, and Tommy wants to thank you personally when he starts college. He's decided to study business so he can help veterans like me. God bless you." Showed the message to Jennifer, who immediately understood the emotional significance of this moment. Henry's presence at his grandson's graduation was the culmination of sacrifice, and it represented the real reason why his decision had been so important. "This is what it was all about," said softly. "Not the promotion, not the bomb threat, not even the media attention. It was about making sure that grandfather could be there for his grandson on one of the most important days of his life." As the evening progressed, received dozens of phone calls and messages from people across the country who had been moved by his story. An elementary school teacher from Ohio called to say that she was using his example to teach her students about compassion. A businessman from Texas offered to pay for Henry's medical treatments. A veterans organization in California invited to speak at their annual fundraising dinner. But perhaps the most meaningful call came from his own daughter, Emma, who was away at college studying journalism. "Dad, I just wanted you to know how proud I am to be your daughter," Emma said through tears. "When I saw the news story about what you did, I realized that you've been teaching me about kindness and integrity my whole life, not just through your words, but through your actions. I love you so much." Robert called again later that evening to provide more details about his new position with Industries. The company wanted to establish a foundation that would provide assistance to veterans and their families, and they wanted to lead the initiative. The salary and benefits package was significantly more generous than the original promotion had been seeking. "We've received hundreds of calls today from people wanting to support this foundation," explained. "Your story has inspired a movement, mister. We want you to help us channel that inspiration into meaningful action." As the night wore on and the airport slowly returned to normal operations, reflected on the extraordinary day he had experienced. 24 hours earlier, he had been focused solely on advancing his career and securing his family's financial future. Now, he found himself at the center of a national story about compassion and the unexpected ways that kindness can change lives. Jennifer Martinez was preparing her final news report about the day's events. She had interviewed dozens of people, from FBI agents to airport workers to fellow passengers, and everyone seemed to understand that they had witnessed something truly special. "This story isn't really about terrorism or airport security," Jennifer explained to her television audience. "It's about the power of human kindness and the way that small acts of compassion can create ripple effects that extend far beyond our imagination. Made a simple choice to help a stranger, and that choice ended up saving lives and inspiring thousands of people across the country." Finally arrived home at nearly midnight, exhausted but profoundly changed by the day's experiences. Sarah was waiting up for him, and they spent hours talking about everything that had happened and what it might mean for their future. "I still can't believe you gave up your seat for a complete stranger," Sarah said as they sat together on their living room couch. "But I understand why you did it, and I'm so grateful that you're the kind of person who would make that choice." Thought about his grandfather's words about character and sacrifice. He realized that the promotion he had originally sought would have been just a job advancement, but the opportunity he now had would allow him to make a real difference in people's lives every single day. 6 months later, the foundation had provided assistance to over 300 veteran families across the United States. Had left his corporate job to become the foundation's executive director, and he spent his days connecting with people like Henry who needed support navigating various challenges. Henry became one of his closest friends and served as an advisor to the foundation. Despite his terminal illness, Henry lived for another 2 years, spending precious time with his grandson Tommy and helping other elderly veterans access the services they needed. When Henry passed away peacefully in his sleep, spoke at his funeral, and promised to continue the work that their friendship had inspired. Tommy graduated from college with a business degree and immediately joined the foundation as a program coordinator. He often told people that his grandfather's story and kindness had shaped his entire approach to life and career. The bomb plot at Denver Airport led to improved security protocols across the country. But more importantly, it reminded everyone involved about the fragile nature of life and the importance of treating each day as an opportunity to make a positive difference. Never forgot the lesson he learned that day in the airport terminal. Sometimes the most important decision you can make is to put someone else's needs ahead of your own, even when you can't see what the consequences might be. Kindness has a way of creating unexpected miracles, and the simple act of helping a stranger can change not just their life, but your own life in ways you never imagined possible. The story of Henry became a reminder that heroism isn't always about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. Sometimes it's about recognizing when someone needs help and having the courage to provide it, regardless of what it might cost you personally. In a world that often feels divided and disconnected, their story proved that compassion and human decency can still create powerful connections between strangers and inspire others to choose kindness over convenience. Years later, whenever faced difficult decisions in his work with the foundation, he would think back to that moment in the airport when he first saw Henry sitting alone on that bench. He would remember the choice he made to stop and help, and he would be reminded that the most meaningful moments in life often come when we choose to put someone else's happiness ahead of our own immediate concerns. That simple decision to skip his flight had indeed changed everything, but not in the way he had originally feared. Instead of costing him his future, it had given him a purpose that was far more fulfilling than any corporate promotion could ever be. And it all started with a moment of human kindness in a busy airport terminal, proving that ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they choose compassion over convenience.